Hello, my name is Diana Fox Carney and I'm a senior advisor at Eurasia Group. I'm delighted to be here to host this conversation around food as part of the GZERO series, Hunger Pains. With me today is Sylvain Charlebois, a Canadian researcher and professor focused on food distribution and food policy at Dalhousie University in Halifax, Canada, where he directs the Agri-Food Analytics Lab. Welcome, Sylvain.
Thank you, Diane. Pleasure to be here.
So really what we want to talk about today is food. And I know you tweet under the name The Food Professor, so we figure you're the right person to talk about this. We hear a huge amount about food these days. When you open up any news media, we hear about the global shortages of food, in large part precipitated by the war in Ukraine. We also hear about food inflation domestically. We hear about labor shortages for people to harvest. I read this morning that there are not enough people in the US harvesting potatoes, so that there are insufficient French fries at McDonald's. So can you give us a little bit of a sense of the big picture? Are these things connected, or are they all separate things that just happen to be taking place at the same time?
Over the last couple of years, I think we've redefined what shortages actually mean. 2 years ago, a lot of people saw empty shelves and they thought there was a shortage of different products, which actually was not the case. Supply chains were heavily impacted by a major disruption, and that disruption was to see an entire food sector, food service, closing overnight. And so that shift really created a lot of problems. And so there wasn't really a shortage at the time. It was just a matter of getting to the right place at the right time. Now, 2.5 years later, we are seeing shortages for a variety of reasons. And I would say reasons are a little in sequence. Climate is always there. Climate is the wild card. It's impacting agriculture, agri-food. Every single year, there's always a problem. And last year was particularly difficult for the northern hemisphere with droughts in Canada, the US, Russia, floodings in Germany, really. So we started the year 2022 with very low inventories. And so we were hoping for a bumper crop this year. The southern hemisphere did deliver somewhat, so we're reassured, but still right now there are a lot of unknowns due to obviously the conflict in Ukraine. So climate, the pandemic really weakened supply chains overall. So we have this COVID hangover that we have to deal with. Things are getting better right now, but essentially to move anything around the world, whether it's on water or on land, it's costing more money. And whether it's because of labor, because of the fact that people are getting sick. And when people get sick and things slow down, you tend to waste more food. Supply chains aren't as efficient. So that's one thing. And so there's that COVID hangover that is impacting food security. Thirdly, obviously the war. The war really triggered a new inflation cycle around the world. We're seeing it right now. We're at the start of it, of a new cycle. We just saw inflation numbers this month from the US and Canada. They're north of 9% now. Very predictable, unfortunately, but this is really what's happening. So Ukraine really just made everything, all inputs more expensive, from oil to wheat to corn to barley to sunflower. And finally, and this is really just beginning right now, is what I would call nationalistic hoarding. Countries are getting nervous looking at this global food security crisis. They believe that they have to prioritize their own domestic market first. So we saw that from Indonesia 2 weeks ago with palm oil, and we just saw that this week again with India and wheat. And so my concern is that we could actually see more nations decide to hoard. In Canada, Canada is a rich country, so we can actually buy our way out of a food security problem by getting our traders to buy more goods for the fall to secure the commodities we need.
So you've described a really complex set of problems. Tell us a little bit about ways that you can see that we might get over some of those problems in the short to medium term?
Short term, I'm quite pessimistic, to be honest. I mean, both the FAO and the World Bank have stated that we are likely to see 100 million additional people suffer from hunger this year and even experience famine. I tend to agree with that, unfortunately. If you look at Northeast Africa, Middle East, some parts of Europe, it's already happening right now. Uh, is there something we can do now? Us, Canada? Not much. But there is a wild card geopolitically, and that would be China. China has a lot of influence. China buys for itself, but does buy for to influence markets a lot. Nobody knows exactly what's going to happen, but if there is one country which can change everything in a matter of weeks, China would be that country. But Canada is insignificant in the equation. As far as the United States goes, obviously, there's been some good, some bad, and some really ugly coming out of the White House in recent days. One, the good is that really you have a Congress looking at a package, a budget of $500 million to empower farmers to grow more food over the next several months. Very good idea. I think it's important. The bad, well, there's a lot of politics in America. I mean, let's face it, it's a very divided country, so not a whole lot of things can actually move ahead very quickly. The ugly is the ethanol mandate. President Biden decided to again extend the S15 season, allowing companies to add 15% of ethanol content in their gas. So promoting more bio fuels. Great idea for the planet. However, you're basically sacrificing food acreage for fuel, like we saw about 15 years ago. And that will actually bring prices even higher. And of course, it's less food for the consumer market. And in the United States, 40% of corn produced is for ethanol alone. 40%.
So, that is there anything that we haven't discussed today, or anything that you don't see out there in the media that you, as a professor who works in this space, are really concerned about, and you think should be more prominent in our thinking about how to make and ensure that we have robust food supply systems going forward?
I think there are two things that have been bothering me, to be honest. The one aspect of agriculture are fertilizers. And making fertilizer supplies more democratic, I think, is critical. And right now, it's anything but. Right now, we see a few companies tweaking market conditions in order to supply manage and inflate prices. And farmers are at the mercy. If you want to increase yields and productivity, you need food for the soil, and that food are fertilizers. We need to be a little bit more coherent when it comes to the food we have to put in the soil to increase yields, and now those are fertilizers. The second thing that I think we need to think about is genetic engineering. We need to get to a very comfortable place where we embrace the virtues of genetic engineering and make it a more understandable science for everyone. Right now, there's a lot of rhetoric. There's a lot of fear mongering, there's also, like, from the biotech side, there are a lot of companies trying to basically sell the virtues of biotechnologies without really addressing concerns of consumers and regulators as well. So you can feel that from a regulatory perspective, there's still a lot of hesitation to embrace bioengineering, and that bioengineering, that bio know-how, I guess, can help farmers deal in a more efficient way with climate change. I think that's the solution. But make it transparent, label the technology so so consumers can befriend the technology as much as possible. There's still no commitment towards the science to make it more transparent still, and that's what's missing.
Last question I'm going to ask you: food inflation. It's started. You mentioned that people are feeling the pain. How long would we expect that to run, if that's not an unfair question? And when could we see a stabilization ahead?
So the seeing food inflation being north of 9% was not a surprise. I think we're going to continue to see food prices rise, but I think we've reached a point of no return. I believe that. I think food prices will continue to rise for quite some time. We're likely, probably, uh, if I am to use a hockey game as an analogy here, we're probably at the end of the first period, probably. And so we still have a long way to go. And consumers will have to devote a larger portion of their budget to food. There's no
Which is
doubt. We were at 9.1% before COVID. We're probably going to reach we're probably going to reach 11.5% within the next 2 years. That is a fact. This is where we're going, and it means that our society will have to value food much more so than it has in the past. So there's some good about that. There's also some bad about that. So the good, of course, is when a society values food, it takes few things for granted. Policies become stronger, much more comprehensive. Bad, of course, is that a lot of people are left behind.
Sylvain. Thanks so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.